So this might be one of the more strange drawing, design / art history lessons. Not really teaching art history, but when we look at the units, most of the units you have says include art history. So that's why in these drawing lessons I'm sort of throwing a bit of art history at you. And because I've already covered Cubism and Futurism, I have to now talk about Dadaism. And that will sort of give you pretty much the roots of the beginning of the 20th century and how art just sort of went crazy from there on. So I've got a slideshow, and I'm just going to talk about Dadaism. Oh, I went one too fast. How do I go reverse on this? Here we go. I'm also going to talk about Surrealism because the two tend to be interlocked and they overlap a little bit. And you've got people like Max Ernst, who was started off as Dadaist and then become a Surrealist, and you find quite a lot of the Surrealists, the early ones, were Dadaists before they were Surrealists. Just having a look at the background. Can everyone see that okay? Is it not too reflecty in here? It's all good? So World War One. Total number of military and civilian casualties in World War One was about 40 million. There were 20 million deaths. There was 21 million wounded. Total number of deaths include 9.7 million military personnel and about 10 million civilians. It's a bit crazy, isn't it? So the backdrop of that, and this just follows straight after the Russian Revolution. A few years later, suddenly you got World War One, or the Great War as they called it back at the time. All of Europe was a bit in turmoil. And I don't know about you guys, but when you think of war, you sort of think, it's crazy, it's nuts, it's absurd. You know, just because things become unstable, the next thing they do is they just start having a great big war. Artists felt the same. Artists didn't want to be involved in this war, and so they went to Switzerland. And so the first artist we're looking at here is Hugo Ball. Now in Zurich, which is what they call the birthplace of Dadaism, in a place called the Cabaret Montage, Hugo Ball gets there and he puts on a cardboard, looks like a Pope's outfit. It's complete with gloves, everything's made out of cardboard. So he's got a little stand there with a lot of words. He writes up nonsense words. Some are real words, but most of them are just words he's just made up. He gets there and he chants it like he is a priest, chanting nonsense. This is his response to the war. The war's nuts, the war's nonsense. So how do you do it? You weaponize nonsense. You become nonsense. You put nonsense out into the world because that's the best response. Other people respond to it by making pretty art. These guys almost call themselves anti-art. So when you say what is Dadaism, it's a very hard thing to sort of say what is Dadaism. You can sort of say what it's not, and you can say what it does. And what it does is it presents nonsense as art form. So this is performance art. Back to him in a minute. Talk a bit about surrealism. The touch screen. There we go. André Breton. It's an interesting looking character, isn't he? In 1925, a lot of people call this poet the guy who started Surrealism, and it sort of comes out of that nonsense of Dadaism. Now he's going to try and be a little bit scientific about it because he's a great fan of Sigmund Freud. So, psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud. His theory was that the human mind is like an iceberg. There's a small percentage of it which is conscious, and then below that is a vast area of the unconscious. Sigmund Freud, however, was not a fan of Surrealism. So Freud was not a fan, because Freud was all about unlocking and understanding the mind, whereas the Surrealists sort of come from this Dadaist point of view of let's make things a bit crazy. So he wasn't a big fan. Carl Jung probably should also be mentioned, because when you look at what the Surrealists were doing, Carl Jung's work probably related to him much better. For those who are unfamiliar with these two guys, this guy is kind of sort of like the cold logical guy. This is probably the heart and soul of psychoanalysis. Carl Jung was, one day he was had somebody on his couch and he was interviewing him, and they're talking about a dream. They're talking about this sun up in the sky, all shining. They had this long penis coming off it. And Jung thought, oh, hang on, hang on, somebody else has had the exact same dream. They're not related to him. And so he came up with this theory of the collective unconsciousness. And that collective unconsciousness is probably a result of all us humans going through very similar things and coming up with the same ideas. So you'll get sort of like, you know, a Robin Hood movie, and somebody on the outside of the planet's also making a Robin Hood movie, totally unrelated. They do it at the same time because it just seems to be the thing to do, because maybe all things leading up to it, or maybe there's some collective unconsciousness where they are all somehow connected. However, this is about art, it's not about psychiatry, so we'll move on. And we're going to talk about some of the techniques that the Dadaists and this one here, the Surrealists, used. Like I say, a lot of these things are all interlocked. That's why I'm talking about Surrealism and Dadaism. Surrealism actually was sort of born out of Dadaism, but there is quite a lot of a grey area overlap. Chance operations, a little quote there. As beautiful as the chance encounter of a sewing machine and an umbrella on an operating table. So, what you've got here is just random objects thrown together. These guys would take long walks, and on their walks they would have chance encounters. So they'd sort of say, okay, look, there's, you know, there's a horse, and walk along a bit more, and there's a drinking fountain, and walk along a bit more, and there's a, you know, a postman or something like that, and so they sort of jumble these things up. Chance encounters, and it's definitely a technique used by the Surrealists a lot. The other way of thinking of chance operations is for those who were doing printmaking yesterday. We were doing pochoir. So we were running it through the press, we were flipping things over, running it out. We didn't know what was going to happen when we lifted it up. It was like, it's either going to be great or it's going to be terrible. But a lot of that was random and to chance. And so with printmaking, you get a lot of this serendipitous thing where, oh, that worked or that didn't. But a lot of it's to chance. So when you're talking chance operations, speaking as a printmaker, originally people would try and imitate ink, or they try and imitate pencil. But print has its own thing, and then people embrace that. So, in an art sense, chance operations is you just throw paint on to a canvas, watch it drip, and way it drips as well. That's beautiful. So there's that sort of chance operation. Okay, Jean Arp. According to the Laws of Chance, 1933. One of his later paintings. This I'm sort of saying is probably Dadaist, and what he did was he was painting one day trying to make this Dadaist painting. He got on a piece of paper, he got very frustrated with it, he ripped it up, threw it to the ground and looked and thought, that looks better. And so here he has just had a black paper and thrown it down and glued it down in place wherever it lands. So this is like, you know, completely chance. This is where the artist is now losing a bit of control. Sometimes losing control is good. Anyone who does watercolours knows that losing a bit of control can sometimes be good. Found objects in collage. when I was talking about those chance encounters, the next natural progression from that is found objects. Very famous piece here called Fountain by Marcel Duchamp. It's actually from a men's urinal, and it was submitted to this nice posh salon and got rejected. And the funny thing is, Marcel Duchamp was actually one of the founding members of this salon that it got rejected in. And so that's why Monty went in incognito, because the rules was any of the founding members could have anything accepted, but he wanted it accepted on its own merits. So he was actually very angry that it wasn't accepted, and he resigned. But what he was doing was he was trying to get an object that he found, and the fact that he's got the idea of, okay, this is going to be art. He's changed the meaning of that object. Hannah Hosch, what she's done here is she's created the photo montage. So she's now got collage, and she's made a montage. And it's basically speaking of Germany at the time. It's even got the Kaiser there with a couple of wrestlers for a moustache. What we get here is sometimes you get big heads on little bodies. So it's actually, she's changing things. When we look at Max Ernst's work, he's a Dadaist who ended up becoming a Surrealist. What you've got here is he's cut up magazines, thinking at the time he was doing this, most of the magazines had more illustrations in than photos, because photos was quite a process to do. He's made pictures, the nonsense pictures, the crazy, but the pictures made up out of just cutting things up and sticking together in a random fashion. Some found objects were changed to make them useless. There's Man Ray. He's glued nails to the bottom of an iron. So it's not really that useful anymore, is it? But has changed it. Now he says this is art. So keep in mind it's absurd. And it's meant to be absurd. That's the whole idea of Dada. Here we have Max Ernst again. Now we are getting into traditional painting. Getting oil paint and sticking it onto canvas. This is called The Temptation of St. Anthony. You can see all these demons and things sort of dragging poor St. Anthony down and trying to tempt him with things. So here's Salvador Dali, also called The Temptation of St. Anthony. St. Anthony has got a cross between him and between his lust for women and gold. So it sort of says a lot of stuff, but it's weird and it's distorted. Surrealism went all over the planet, because Surrealism is between the wars. And when Nazi Germany turned up, the Surrealists, they scattered in all directions, to Mexico, to New York, to other parts of the world. And so Surrealism was probably spread worldwide by the Nazis, because artists just want to do their art, they don't want to get involved in another war. So what is the legacy of Dadaism, and how does it relate to our work today? The most easy and obvious one's punk rock. Punk rock was an anti-art. Punk rock said, we hate all music except for our own. They played their music hard and nasty. They spoke to a generation. The Sex Pistols here, when they played their music, they were living in poverty. They couldn't afford leather jackets. They used to wear garbage because, garbage bags, because they couldn't afford things. At the same time, you had disco. Everyone's wearing designer flares. Everyone's spent hours on their hair to look immaculate. It was the Bee Gee era. That did not relate to how these guys felt, in the same way that everything being normal didn't relate to the Dadaists. So here's a movement, a reaction against norms. And also their art. Okay, Jamie Reid did a lot of the art for the Sex Pistols. We're now getting back into Hannah Hosh territory, where we've got cut-ups, we've got found objects. Picture of a queen, the Union Jack is found objects. There are words cut up and pasted on there. So we're now, this is Dadaism later on in the 20th century. Max Ernst, Hannah Hosh making up pictures out of collage, and I think this is about 58 from memory, 1958. This piece is called What Is It That Makes Today's Homes So Different, So Appealing by Richard Hammond. He's made up a picture out of advertising. The muscle man there's carrying a big lollipop thing with the word pop on it, and pop art was born. So you got Andy Warhol because of Hannah Hosh, because of Dadaism. Here is an album cover for the Buzzcocks, and it's by Linda Sterling. Again, you've got what you see with Max Ernst, with Hannah Hosh, you've got this cut up image. However, she's saying something. This is a good feminist piece. She's saying that men want to see women's bodies and they want to see women iron clothes, domesticate them. And so that's probably a good feminist piece. Here's a nice young lady wearing a meat dress. Again, it's a Dadaist move. It's a protest against the norms of the time. So, John Arp ripped up paper and threw it down. The inspiration from that is a lot of poets would cut up words, throw it down and make a nonsense poem. Here we have David Bowie. Probably my favourite line here comes down about line 5, where it says, "You're a squawking like a pink monkey bird." Should be a hit for the time. Well, actually it wasn't a big hit for the time. It's actually one of these ones that failed miserably, but then later on become a big hit. Monty Python's Flying Circus. Very much Dadaist inspired work. This guy, Terry Gilliam, American, he didn't want to go to Vietnam. He's going to London, forget Vietnam. And so he is cutting up pictures from magazines. He's photocopying them, hand colouring them, putting them together, and then animating them to make ridiculous things happen. So if you've ever seen his works, they're funny, but they're also extremely Dadaist. They are absurd and crazy because of the crazy times he lived in. Adventure Time. Can't have Adventure Time without Surrealism, or even just a touch of Dadaism. Can't have Surrealism without Dadaism. So when Hugo Ball put that cardboard uniform on and did his Pope thing, what did he start off? He started off a whole host of weird things happening. And back to fine arts, darling. Tracy Emin, My Bed. So what she's done is she's looked at her bed, thinks, I'm going to put that in an art gallery. Taken a photograph of it, moved it all there, made the mess all exactly the same. All the cigarette butts and slippers and everything, all the junk was all just placed just the way it is in her room. And that's in an art gallery of My Bed. Yeah. And this wouldn't happen without Duchamp's urinal. Okay. That's your crash course in Dadaism and Surrealism. Each time I do this, I do get a little bit worried that I'm inoculating you guys. I would encourage you to go and read books, look up things, to find out more about these art movements, because to have a good knowledge in visual arts, early 20th century is a real hotbed of change. It's where everything sort of goes very strange. Right. This is what we're going to do. In the spirit of Jean Up, I want you guys to write down on one of those pieces of card I gave you, doesn't matter which one, we're not going to be that uniform because let's get Dadaist about this. A noun. Now, a noun is an object. It can be an animal, it can be a chair, a table, it can be a house, it can be anything you want. Just write down a noun. Doesn't matter what noun, just write it down. Alright. On your next piece of paper, let's give it an adjective, a descriptive word, like, I don't know. If you get one that you wrote, hand it back to me and grab another one. So, in the hand. Everyone's got 4 pieces of paper. Now everybody knows what they're drawing. It has to be smaller than A4, because what we're going to do next is we're going to photocopy it up to A3 and distort it. So what did you get? There's somebody else standing on a chair.
Stretching dark chair.
Okay, that's cool. Alright, now just make sure there's no sharp bits there. It's going to scratch my glass. Here we go. This is how to misuse a photocopier. See the light? Look at that.
Cool.
So what I do, pressing this on A3 this time, when the light goes, you move it with it and do crazy stuff with it. So here's another example. What you can do, when it goes through,
Okay.
here comes a piece of paper.
Oh, cool. It's really stretchy now.
Yeah, you have a go.
Okay.
So press the button, wait for the light to get about there, then move it, and then try and get the light to go on the other side.
Which button?
The green button there. Press,
Now?
move, that's it. Well done. Here it comes. Hey, look at that.
Nice.
And it's one of the many ways of
It's really
misusing a
cool.
photocopier.
Wow.
It can also be done with a scanner.
Cool.